give full credit to Capcom. They were determined to make a decent sequel to the original Final Fight, and after the disappointing Final Fight 2, Capcom went home and licked their wounds and had another go at a sequel. And this one is called Final Fight 3, or Final Fight Tough as I Knew It, seeing as I played the Japanese version. The game features a return of the protagonist Guy along with Hagar, and also introduces new characters Lucia and Dean. The game's plot takes them through their efforts to rid Metro City of the new Skull Cross gang. Final Fight 3 introduced new moves, as well as branching paths during gameplay and multiple endings. Also available is the option to fight alongside a CPU controlled partner for those without mates, but still enjoyed a two-player beat 'em up. By the time this game got released in Japan near the end of 1995, it was up against some pretty stiff competition. For the home consoles, Streets of Rage 2 was still the yardstick in my opinion, but for Capcom they had an even bigger obstacle to overcome, one which was far closer to home. You see, Konami had released the rather excellent Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 4, Turtles in Time, for the SNES in 1992, which predates the release of Final Fight 2. But at that time, Capcom were more focused on trying to get Final Fight to compete with Streets of Rage, and had overlooked Turtles in Time completely. The result was that Final Fight 2 was a ghastly game that was not very good, and with the SNES having a decent two-player beat 'em up in Turtles in Time, Capcom would really have to push the boat out to top that as well. The end result is a game that tries so hard to better Streets of Rage 2 and Turtles in Time, but it completely fails in doing so. Let me explain. Firstly, let's have a look at the visuals, and in my opinion, these are just average. They lack the colour and vibrancy of Streets of Rage, and with mostly dull, static backgrounds, they lack the depth of the backgrounds found in Turtles in Time. The main sprites are a mixed bag. The Guy and Hagar sprites look okay, with Guy looking closer to his Street Fighter Alpha look than in the original Final Fight game, and Hagar looking very close to his Saturday Night Slam Masters sprite. I guess Capcom are trying to create this Capcom universe, with each of the characters resembling each other across all the multiple games they would appear in. The new characters Dean and Lucia look incredibly generic. In fact, when playing this on the Auto 2-player mode, I would often confuse them as the enemy and launch an attack on them. The enemies are so incredibly generic it's unreal. And what the heck have they done to Andro? He looks like a sort of Frankenstein zombie now, and he appears to have shrunk as well. Some of the enemies look monotone? A single colour with slightly different shading up and down, from head to toe. The original Final Fight had lots of character, and lots of characters. This has none. The bosses all look lame, and so completely non-threatening. And there is also a lot of clipping or sprite restrictions all over the place, especially when the screen fills up with enemies. This is the kind of thing I was used to in 8-bit consoles, not 16-bit consoles. So far, it's not looking too good. The sound in Final Fight, especially on the SNES, has always been a problem. Yes, the tunes on the original were pretty close to the arcade. Problem was, the tunes were not exactly great. Some tunes were okay, but nothing on the level of Streets of Rage. And with Final Fight 2, a lot of the tunes were used again and again and again, and they were almost all rubbish. Well, it's the same thing here. These tunes are awful, and they don't sound awful. The SNES sound chip was probably the best sound chip of the 16-bit generation, and done a good job of creating a more natural sounding sound. What I mean is the composed music is awful. It really is. The sound effects are somewhat muffled. The punches lack this sharp, crisp noise of bone on bone. It sounds like you are punching and kicking enemies through a pillow or something, and in some cases, it sounds like a packet of crisps or potato chips being munched on after a 10-pint drinking session. The sounds of the glass breaking and all the other sound effects are fine, but really the sound is below par as well. But surely the gameplay must save it. After all, the big complaint from the original was it was missing a character and a boss and a level and a 2-player option. It was lacking a lot. Well, this game is still lacking a character, in my opinion. Why the heck was Cody not included in this game? Why did Capcom change the characters in each game, with Hagar being the only constant? The new characters don't add anything new to the gameplay at all. And for me personally, when I play Final Fight, I want to use the original characters. And I was never a fan of Guy, so that means using Hagar. So only one option to choose from in this game for me. The characters do have some new moves in their arsenal, so they can now run or dash and pull off a running attack, although it doesn't really do that much damage. And you can now pound on an enemy on the deck, which is always fun. Capcom have tried to introduce some special moves, akin to Streets of Rage 2, but again, they have failed miserably. In Streets of Rage 2, those moves were so easy to pull off. It was a double tap in the direction of the enemy, or hold a direction when pressing special attack. Capcom have went down the route of using Street Fighter 2 rotational moves, which, in a pseudo 3D game, doesn't really work, as your character will inevitably move down the screen when doing the motion, and so it can result in a hit or a miss. And to combat this, Capcom have adjusted the hit detection, which is seriously woeful in this game. But that isn't even the biggest criticism about the gameplay. Nope. The dreaded slowdown is back, and it is just about everywhere in this game. It doesn't slow down to a crawl, but it is distracting enough to be annoying. This was 1995. This kind of thing should have been a thing of the past on the SNES. Konami had little to no slowdown in Turtles in Time, so why couldn't Capcom make a game without it? At this point, it's hard to see where all the extra memory was being used. The graphics were uninspiring, the sound depressing, and the gameplay, well, that was disappointing. I played this game in CA Games on Christmas Eve of 1995. I was out doing some last minute shopping and seeing if I could pick up some early New Year bargains for my recently acquired PlayStation. But when I seen this on his Super Famicom, I asked if I could have a go. And with a quick 5-minute go on 2-player. I didn't think it was great or anything, but as I was no longer at school and had been working for over a year now, spending £65 on a rubbish game meant nothing to me. I reasoned I could always get rid of it by trading it in, and so I bought it, took it home and played it for a few days. When my old schoolmate with the Super Famicom came around to mine a few days after Christmas, we had a go on it, and then I just gave it to him as a late Christmas present. He seemed happy and he did like the game, but then he never ever did have a good taste in games anyway. Final Fight was such a good game in the arcades. It still ranks up there in my all-time favourite arcade games. But by God, the sequels were just awful and probably best avoided, in my opinion. And that was my look back at Final Fight 3 on Super NES. If you like this video, then please do give me a sub and a thumbs up, or maybe even a comment or two about your memories of Final Fight 3 on the Super Nintendo. And that's all from me, folks. Thanks for watching.